What is your name? What's your title?
Robert Huseman, an attorney at Varkey, Somerset.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up?
So I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. I went to North Shore High School, which is on the east side of town. After graduating high school, I went to Sam Houston State University and majored in criminal justice. I knew I wanted to be a police officer. That's really the only thing I ever wanted to do. When I graduated, I had just received a scholarship from the 100 Club in Houston, which is like a booster club for the Houston Police Department. And so after graduation, there was a stipulation if you received that scholarship, then you have to work inside of Harris County. So that kept me in Houston, and I went to work for the Houston Police Department. And I think I was there probably just a little under 10 years. I worked 3 years in patrol in the 5th Ward. I went to Homicide Division, where I spent my last 7 years. And while I was there, I went to law school part-time. And the reason I did that is because I always had this idea that I was going to go back to Sam Houston State and get my master's degree in criminal justice, which would have helped me promote. But it was probably an hour drive, and it would have been every other weekend or maybe one weekend a month, I can't remember. And the thought of that didn't really appeal to me. And there was a law school down the street, South Texas College of Law. So instead of driving to Huntsville once every month or twice every month, I decided to go to law school at South Texas. And I did that part-time, went to law school during the day, worked homicide on the evening shift. And my plan was to graduate from law school, take the bar, but stay at the police department for at least 10 more years and get my retirement and then go practice law. But I met my wife, who was an assistant district attorney in Harris County, and we started dating, and then she got a job up here in Fort Worth at the Securities and Exchange Commission. And so in a matter of just a few weeks, really, I decided to resign from the police department, come to Fort Worth, and I think I had one more semester of law school at that time. So I took that at Texas Wesleyan, which is now A&M. Graduated from South Texas because those hours transferred back. Took the bar and went to work at the Tarrant County DA's office.
Why'd you want to become a cop?
Our house was burglarized when I was very, very young, and something about that really affected me. Some of my dad's stuff was stolen. It kind of made me mad as a kid. That's my earliest memory of wanting to be a police officer, thinking that I could, prevent that kind of thing from happening. And it just seemed like a really interesting job, a fun job, and it was. I really, really enjoyed it. I really liked being a patrol officer. And maybe as I became an adult and started working in police work, I think I liked it for different reasons than I originally thought I would. You learn pretty quick you can really help people, and so I enjoyed that. And I guess just being ambitious, that was what really made me want to go to homicide. I thought maybe I want to go to robbery or homicide. Narcotics was never something that appealed to me. Those are different kind of cops. They're good cops, but it just wasn't my thing. But I had the opportunity to go to homicide and did that, and it was probably the best job I ever had. But I do remember my sergeant at the time telling me at some point that it is a young man's game. And at the time I was single, no kids, and so it was easy, and I just did that and loved it, and it's around the clock really. And when I went to law school, it was really difficult time-wise. But yeah, looking back after I got married and had kids, I just can't imagine how someone can really do it if you have a family. Mm-hmm. So it was good timing for me.
Yeah. And you were good at what you did. You won some awards. You were recognized.
Yeah, I got pretty lucky. The guy that I worked with had been doing it a long time, and so that helped get some good cases. And then also just being on call, being the first up. We had some really interesting cases. I worked on the Railcar Killer. Can't remember what year that was now, but I worked on that case, and that was just kind of by chance because we were on call that night, and West University needed help with the crime scene investigator, and so we just went out to see if we could assist, and we ended up doing a little bit more than just helping on the scene. And so we worked the case, and several months later the Rangers got involved because he had started killing some other folks, and it was a good case. It was interesting. It kind of got out of hand a little bit because of everybody wants to be involved in it, but the result was good, and he was arrested, and that was one of the big cases. So I got an award from DPS for that, and maybe some other stuff I can't remember now.
So what was it like, the transition to becoming a prosecutor?
So it really wasn't that difficult, And the thing is, when I was a police officer in Harris County, I would see the interactions between the DAs and the defense attorneys there. My wife was an assistant DA, and it was a really hostile environment, real adversarial. And so I wasn't really sure if I wanted to be a prosecutor, because when I didn't want to be involved in that day-to-day, those fights, And so I remember going to Tarrant County thinking, well, I'll see. I'll see if this works out. If it doesn't, I'll do something else. But I really fell in love with it, enjoyed it, and I enjoyed going to work every day, because back then, the defense attorneys and the prosecutors are professional with one another and they get along, and it was really a completely different atmosphere than what I had seen in Harris County. So I stuck around. I went to juvenile shortly after going to felony and did the gun prosecution cases, gun violence position. Did that about a year and a half, and then I went back downtown, and 12 months later I was in the gang unit. And that's really where I spent most of my time. I think I was there 7.5 years, and I had a good chief. It was a good crew, and we just had a really good time. And I just remember I may have enjoyed that more than being in homicide. It was just it's a really fun job. We had interesting cases, and we were in trial a lot, and I really enjoyed that.
So do you think being a cop before you were a prosecutor made you a better prosecutor?
Yeah, I think so. It made the job easier for me, because I remember reading reports or watching videos. It was kind of like I'd been behind the scenes, so I kind of knew what was going on. The language. You kind of know what's going on with the police officers and the witnesses, and so I think it did help a lot. I mean, the basic stuff for a prosecutor, the rules of evidence and that stuff, that's had to be learned. But I think being a police officer helped with all that. So I think it seemed like it was a little bit easier for me when I got there.
Okay, so now you're on the other side. And what's that like?
So I found out doing this that it's not much different than when I was in patrol for me, really. When I was a 21-year-old patrol officer, you get to help people. And I really enjoyed helping people as a patrol officer when they got their car stolen, or if they were victimized in some other way. Just helping them made me feel better, and did the same thing as a prosecutor. And here it's kind of the same thing. You have people that are arrested, and they're not all bad people. Most of them are just like us. They have a bad day, and you can help them through the process. So at some point in my career, I think you have the idea of you put yourself in someone else's shoes. You put yourself in the victim's shoes, and so what would you want this police officer, this detective, to do? And that's kind of how I see my job as a defense attorney. I put myself in their shoes. They don't know the system. They don't know the law. They have no idea what's going to happen. So if it was me, I would want someone who could navigate through the system, and I enjoy doing that.
Do you feel like your time as a homicide detective has helped you see things that other attorneys may not see?
Yeah, I think so. I remember actually the first murder cases I tried was before I got in the gang unit. As a second chair attorney with Lisa Callahan, I tried some murder cases. I just felt like I had an advantage over what most attorneys would have had just by reading the case or watching the videos or seeing the interviews, because again, it's almost like I was there. I would view the case as if I was the detective working the case, and so I would see things that they did that were really, really good, and I would also see things that maybe they should have done, and so I was prepared for that as a prosecutor on how to handle that, especially with maybe interrogations or, confessions. In the courtroom during trial, I think with direct examination or maybe cross-examination of witnesses, I was always really comfortable with that, because I just have felt like I had maybe been at the scene and worked the case. And so I think it really did help me. Do
you have a memorable case or cases, like things like you mentioned the Ramirez case, but do you have any other cases that just stick out? Well,
I think really maybe my most memorable case for me, when I first got to the gang unit, my first capital was a drug house rip-off murder. But it was really challenging because it was mainly built on a co-defendant testimony, and so I didn't indict it. It was close to trial when I got in the unit, and I adopted the case, and we had to put a lot of work into it in a short period of time to prepare for trial. I think we tried it on the 2nd of January, which you're coming off a Christmas break, so that was stressful. A lot of witnesses from out of town, and really, it's one of those cases you feel like you might could lose. It's one of those ones that has to be tried, and you're just not sure how it's going to come together. And it was just challenging. And again, the victim had been selling drugs, but his family was amazing, and it was my first chair capital. And so after it's over, or during the trial, you don't want to disappoint the family, right? They're really good people, and then after it's over, you just really feel good about bringing justice for them. And I just remember that case.
Is that the one where the guy went off in the courtroom?
No, that's a memorable case. That's a case I had with Christy. That case is memorable because the victim he went home for lunch with his sister from school, and they found 2 burglars in their house, and he was shot and killed. And we tried the case. We didn't know who the shooter was for sure. We knew that, of course, law parties, we knew one of them was a shooter. We tried Patterson, and he was convicted, and then he had an outburst in the courtroom that got a lot of media attention. He was 16 years old at the time of the killing, and so it had those ingredients for some media. But what I remember of that case was that we didn't know who the shooter was, and we had an audio tape. So Eric had called 911 when he heard the burglars upstairs, and they came down and confronted him. He put the cell phone in his pocket, so we had a recording of the actual shooting, and you could hear one of the suspects, who sounded like he was the one that shot, making demands. But again, we didn't know who the shooter was, and we took the audio to Barry Dickey. He's an expert. He's great. Took it to him, and he said there's nothing he could really do with it because the voice we were trying to identify was yelling and screaming and excited, and it would be difficult to have a duplicate of that, or to make a duplicate of that. And so we didn't really do anything with it during the trial. And then he had the outburst in the courtroom. And so after the trial was over, about a week later, I remember I got a call from Christy Jack, and she's like, "Hey, I got a great idea. Let's take the recording from the courtroom and send it to Barry and see if he now has a duplicate, something to compare." And I'm like, "That's an amazing idea. I wish I would have thought about it." So we sent it to Barry, and he calls us, I don't know, a few days later, maybe a few weeks later. And I've never heard anybody so excited before, because he's like, "This is an exact match." And he came to the office. He goes, "I want to come show you just how good this is." And so he came to the office, and what he does is so technical. But he had charts, and he said, "Look, this is how I know it's Broderick Patterson's the shooter. And because see these graphs and these marks and these lines right here." And he goes, "And I sent this to Canada. There's another guy that's really good, and he confirms it. He's a shooter." So now we'd already tried Broderick, but that was still important because we can tell the family, "Hey, we know who the shooter is." Okay, and there's Broderick Patterson, the one we've already tried. He got life, so that's comforting for them to know that, and then it allows us to make a more reasonable plea outcome for the non-shooter, and I think he got 35 years. What was so memorable about Patterson is, when you get to know the family, they were the nicest people I've ever met, right? They just know everybody in town. Everybody in town knows them, and they had a swimming pool in their backyard, and so anybody we talked to said, "Oh, I learned how to swim in their pool," and so just really, really good people. And what interesting about that case was the victim and the defendant, Patterson, they were in elementary school together. Mm. Okay, so we would go, me and Christy, and I can't remember who our investigator was, we would go interview these teachers, these elementary school teachers, middle school teachers, and they had been teaching for 10, 20 years, 25 years, and they'd been at all the different schools. They knew both of them. They knew the victim and the defendant. And I just remember talking to them, and they hadn't taught them in 15 years, but they know them like their family. And it's just amazing to me. I'm like, I had no idea that a teacher could remember a student that long, but they do.
So what do you like to do in your free time?
Really, right now, my free time, and for the past 16 years, my free time is spent with my daughter. I don't remember really how, but somehow we got involved in volleyball for my daughter. I remember thinking to give her several options with sports. I think it's important for the kids to be involved in some activity. So for her, she tried a bunch of different sports, but she just really excelled in volleyball. She enjoyed it. I enjoyed it because it was indoors, away from the sun and the rain. But just looking back, it seems like that's all we've done for the past 16 years. And so if I'm not doing volleyball with my daughter, then I'm trying to exercise and spend time with my wife.
Is there any words of wisdom you would offer to a young lawyer, whether it be a prosecutor or a defense attorney?
So what I would tell a young lawyer that was going to get into the criminal defense work, whether it's as a prosecutor or defense attorney, is that the job can be very stressful. So you have to really need to start young and just manage and deal with the stress. Don't get too emotional over the cases. I've seen defense attorneys get so angry at an offer from a prosecutor, and I think it's important to step back and understand maybe why that's their offer, and then look to the future to see what's really going to happen with the case. And prosecutors, nowadays they have so many cases. The system's so crazy with they're overworked and they're underpaid, and so it would be the same advice. Just don't get stressed out by take some time off, enjoy your weekends. I see prosecutors just working really too hard, and they're going to get burnt out. So that would be my advice.
How do you want to be remembered?
Well, okay, this is a little dark, but I don't think I will be remembered. I mean, I don't see people being remembered. We kind of have a joke around the DA's office when I was there. When somebody retires, you're going to forget about them in a week. So I think you're maybe forgotten. But I think it's important to be remembered fondly by your family, maybe. And that would make me happy if I can just, if my daughter and my hopefully grandchildren have a good memory of me like I have of my grandparents, I'd be happy. Is that too dark?
Thank you so
You
much.
guys are like Howard Stern. You're like...